Hi, and welcome to this new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Ewan Semple.
And there is a fly in my room, so there is three of us today on this episode, which is...
one of whom is talking sense.
Yeah, at least one of them. This is episode 12, so welcome everybody.
And the fly.
Today, we wanted to have a chat around how we can personalize our experience with computers through a whole number of tools that are becoming more and more available and more sophisticated, and which are all based on AI and on machine learning and on the idea of computers becoming smarter and in a way making decisions for us. And I was just reading about a startup called Clockwise, which recently raised $11 million. And what they do is they deploy an AI that is able to look and compare the calendars of a group of people working together and rearrange meeting in the calendar in order to optimize the time and possibly find free time where people can do actual work instead of going to the meetings. And I think that it is interesting how more and more we have these little pieces of intelligence that are entering our professional and personal life and changing things for us and optimizing things for us. And as we were saying, you have been doing this kind of hacks and tricks for a long time, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, I love tinkering with stuff, and the fact that for some time now, iOS has, in a very basic way, if you go into settings and Siri, you can see some prompts where it notices things that you've done relatively often and suggests that you could turn that into a shortcut, and then you could have a voice activation through Siri that would just trigger it and run it for you. And just talking about the developer conference last week in San Francisco, where they were showing off the next level of that, if you like, where the shortcuts is actually built into the operating system. So that gives it access to a whole bunch of core stuff. Point of that being that it will know when you connect a particular Wi-Fi network. It will know when you've started using a particular app. And all of those can then be used at your instigation to trigger a set of actions. So you can automate a whole bunch of actions. So, you can imagine if I'm starting to use, say, Word, start tracking my time, and that means that if you're a writer, it will automatically be capturing the amount of time you spent on a particular project. And so lots of little things like that are becoming increasingly easy. And the other thing that they were showing off was the fact that it can now have a dialogue. So, the automation can ask you questions back. You could trigger something that says, do you want this or do you want that? And you choose one or the other. And then a different set of actions follow on as a consequence of that. And I was listening to a podcast that was making the point that in some ways, at a very basic level, that's programming. And, I've often ranted about the fact that it's such a shame that in schools we lurched from teaching kids how to use PowerPoint to teaching them how to code. Because I think, yes, it's useful to understand how to code. I mean, I only, at a very, very superficial level, understand that sort of stuff. But it's clear that in the future, fewer and fewer people will actually need to code because the systems will do it for you and you'll be able to interact, as the case with Siri, with your voice. I need to do this, and then this, if that, and it will just go off and do it for you. So it's just incredible because it's sort of beginning to be there now.
Oh, well, I mean, it's... Apple envisioned that in, I think it was 1987, the Knowledge Navigator.
The Knowledge Navigator, that's right, yeah.
But, clearly, even if you look at how code is written these days, actual code by professional programmers, we're moving higher and higher in the stack. And with more and more level of abstraction. So it's perfectly reasonable to think that with a reasonably sophisticated AI, you can write software just by talking to a machine and explaining what you want. Of course, the challenge is, do you know what you want?
Knowing what you want. Well, I was thinking that when you were describing that time optimizing thing. Do I really want all my days to be completely jam-packed from minute to minute?
Well, I mean, I to be fair, my understanding of what this company is trying to do is actually create free time by optimizing, because they basically say, because people are not very good at optimizing time, they end up having all these fractions of time occupying their whole day. If we can actually work on that, we can probably literally optimize time, not to allow you to do more things or have more free time or just work less. So
I've just had a cracking idea for a bit of AI that could track the outputs or the consequences of meetings. So you could imagine sort of this meeting happened on this date, these were the undertakings, and then the system would know whether any of them ever got done.
Well, that would be the end of all consulting firms. In my experience, you basically go to a meeting and you say, "So, what did we discuss last time?" And you half an hour.
Let's discuss it again.
Then basically you decide that none of the thing that you were supposed to do has been done, and then you decide again you're going to do it for next meeting, and off you go.
That's right.
No, but
and of course, if the managers escape from meetings, you've just unleashed them on the organisation, which may or not be a good thing.
I do think that by introducing some kind of intelligence between events or between the jobs that we need to perform, we could work in a much better and much more efficient way. So it's not necessary. We're not saying that there is going to be an intelligence replacing us, at least not for now, but there might be intelligence that is going to help us doing better what humans do better. So something that collects all the information that you need before you start doing something, or that displays the things that you need to have to see when you need to see them. Something that optimizes access to information. All these stuff, I'm pretty sure that we are already seeing significant changes, and I think that there will be more and more changes coming very, very quickly. I guess that the problem is not how smart the AI is. I think that the problem is how smart we are, in the sense that, if I think about yourself and the work that you do to optimize your work, it's fascinating. I mean, every time we meet to trigger some cool macro, I'm fascinated. But you're pretty much almost the only person I know that does that.
I'm just weird.
And you're special. But I guess that is how much do we need to lower the entry threshold to that point before it becomes, if not mainstream, at least more common than it is. And I think that we are basically waiting for the right type of user interface to come out, for the right type of interaction that will start creating these macros, creating automation, or asking for help effective and easy. And I started using Siri to write stuff in my shopping list, just because it's faster to tell Siri, write something in my shopping list, add something to my shopping list, that literally to pull out the phone, pull out an app. That it was a much quicker thing. Or to set up reminders, remind me to do things that day at a time, because the interaction with the calendar and the date and the time picker, it's a little... It's a little uncomfortable. It's actually much easier just to tell Siri to do it.
And it also depends on your circumstances. I was just saying that when I'm driving my trucks, I don't want to take my hands off the wheel for any length of time and faff about with phones. That would be illegal apart from anything else. But all I need to do is raise my watch to my mouth, and I can say things like, remind me to do this, or I can even take notes. I'm making diary entries about different things that have happened during the day, just as a kind of professional log, if you like. And I can do all of that through my watch, and so you're right, I think. But even that, many people don't know they can do that. And discoverability is a big thing. I noticed Apple are dropping the force press thing on the iOS because just so few people were using it, and it confused them that it worked on some devices and not on others. And actually, it was quite interesting because I listened to a podcast with Craig Frederici, who's the head of software, and he was saying that they're very aware of the fact that for many kids, young kids, an iPad may be their first computing device. And certainly for older folks, both my parents have now insisted that they both use iPads because I've just got less hassle to deal with. But equally, there's a kind of middle body of people like me who want to tinker and do more with them. And it's a real challenge accommodating, like you said, the range of different expectations that there are.
I think that I also think that to some degree there are some deficiencies in how Apple is offering features to users, in the sense that I have read, there are some major UI thinkers who have been criticizing Apple for a long time, and some of them actually come from Apple, saying that Apple has been not following its own initial rules about discoverability of features, about making things evident, about supporting the fact that users try to do things. I mean, there are some features that are just completely hidden. If you don't know that it is there, you will never find it.
You're not going to stumble across it, yeah.
And I think that to some degree, even for developers, given that you need to work within the constraints of Apple guidelines, it's all too easy to create features that are never going to be found. I mean, for example, the Siri shortcuts that you were mentioning. I mean, they're brilliant, but how do you tell people that they are there? I mean, of course, you can put an alert out from time to time, but it is annoying, and it's hard to explain them how to use them. I suppose.
One of the things about them being built into the operating system now is that they will be on every device, and so long as people turn on the ability to accept new shortcuts, I could write a shortcut that I know would help my dad and send it to him. And so he doesn't have to know it's there. I can know it's there if you like.
Yeah, but in any case, you need to enable users to find out that you can do that. I mean, you need to create. I think that one of the main differences that there are between modern interaction with computers and the type of interaction that we used to do back in the tinkering days is that most users have a very fractioned interaction with apps. You don't spend a lot of time with one single application. You actually jump back and forth between things. Yeah. So even to me, as a software designer, even trying to intrude in the interaction of a user and say, "Hey, why don't you check this out?" Very often, they don't have time. Not now. They are not sitting there trying things. Very often, they're just trying to achieve something, and any type of exploration is actually going to get in the way of them achieving something.
But what if it? Because I can, as we were saying earlier, I can imagine it's already the next level of software development is where the AI is watching. Well, as I said, the very basic Siri prompts are an example of where the phone's kind of aware of what you're doing and will prompt you with things. But there's already systems watching what people do at work. And if you've done the same repetitive sequence of events, it'll sort of pop up and say, "Do you want me to automate this? I notice you've done it 5 times today," sort of thing. So I can imagine
that would destroy whole industries of
well, perhaps, but I think it's what we're moving towards, which is where you don't have to know. You almost don't have to know that you don't know, because the system will know that you don't know, and then it could help.
Yes, well, that is definitely, and it is to some degree what Siri has been trying to do for a while. I mean, you do get this softly suggested recommendations that sometime are right, sometime are wrong. I mean, on on your birthday a few days ago, I mean, for the whole day, my phone was saying, "Do you want to call Ewan?" And not really. It's like, and that was for 24 hours. It was like, "No, really, you want to call Ewan?" I was like, "No, it's fine." It's like, and it does.
I was waiting for you to call Paolo.
Yeah, probably because Siri on your phone say Paolo's going to call any time.
Yeah, Paolo's about to call you.
And it was it was interesting because it was like the second time it happened. So out of thousands of contacts I have, it quite correctly it decided that you are a closer relationship than others. And it was, giving a recommendation. So that was actually clever. I should have called. I apologize.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. I know. Sorry, but so it's interesting. I mean, even the kind of granddaddy of them all, the kind of Amazon recommendation system, is far from perfect. And the much lauded, we've talked many times about the Facebook algorithms, which are meant to be advertising stuff to me, and you just sort of half the time think, where on earth did you think I might be interested in that? So as long as the things are that unreliable or imprecise, there's a way to go.
Well, the Amazon recommendation algorithm apparently is going to be available to you soon as an AWS service.
Interesting.
I think they announced it. If I'm not mistaken, they announced it this very recently. So if you will be able to build your own recommendation based on their engine.
So I'm guessing different, not necessarily products or services, but just on whatever you pointed at, presumably.
Oh yes. You can basically you can teach your own catalog, and then by observing the behavior of your client, the system will be able to provide recommendations. I mean, I think that this is even more interesting to some degree. If at any point in the future we will have a system that allows to build software by talking to a machine, and this machine can actually reach out to APIs across the different services providers. So, I could talk to Siri, and Siri could interact, decide to use a service from AWS to do something, and a service from Google to do something else, and a service from, one small provider, and basically merge them together to satisfy your request. That becomes even more interesting, and it's of course Siri is actually listening to me and writing down everything I'm saying.
Yes, but unlike Alexa, it's not going further than your phone.
But that is actually I think potentially that would be liberating Siri. I mean, allowing Siri to extend farther outside the little walled garden of your phone, or even the walled garden of Apple ecosystem, and reach out to other services.
But this is such a good example of the technology being neither good nor evil, in the sense that it's frustrating sometimes when I use my iPad, which I use less than the iPhone. My iPhone's very good. Siri on the iPhone is very good. Siri on the watch is particularly good at understanding me and what I mean, which is why I'm using it as much as I am now. The iPad, less so, because I use the iPad less. I use Siri on the iPad less. And because of Apple's, I think, positive disinclination to merge it all together, it's like photos. I mean, for a while there was they only recently allowed the Photos engine to learn from what you'd done on one Photos app, and so I've often said I'll pay the premium for Apple because I'm more confident that my data is not being misused. But if then I want to be able to do cool stuff, and then this is what I say in my keynotes, that what might seem like cool stuff now, and might be great fun to join up Amazon and Google and blah blah and make all these cool things happen, might be a complete dystopian nightmare 10 years down the line. when the things that I thought were cool have suddenly become illegal.
I don't know where you were living, but it's already a big dystopian nightmare today. So
Yeah, well, I know. I know.
Maybe it's going to be better. It's interesting. I never noticed a difference in Siri interactions between devices to the point that I kind of assumed that in some magic with respect to your privacy way, it was actually working across devices, especially because Siri is interpreted server-side anyway. So why would they...
Well, I understood that was the case, and certainly my experience is that even things like on my phone, on my iPad, if I'm dictating, Siri will misspell my name more frequently, whereas it gets it right all the time on the iPhone.
Do you use the same microphone?
How do you mean the same microphone?
You just say they use the same headset or something, or
no. I mean, this is if I'm talking directly to the device.
Because it might be that the microphone on the phone is just better than the microphone.
Maybe that's true. And I certainly think that's true with the watch, because the watch's mic is great.
Yeah. Maybe it can hear you better. Oh, the watch thing. Do you know that there is a feature to push the water out? When you go swimming. I went swimming with my watch for the first time last week, and it works. I mean, you push the little button and you get the little droplets of water to come out from the side. It's fantastic. The only problem is that there isn't an activity that fits well the description of going swimming in Grado, which is this place that you have been to, where basically you have very shallow water for a mile before you can actually swim. So it's a combination,
isn't it? Yeah.
So it's kind of a combination of a walk, then you swim a little, then you walk a little more, then swim a little. The watch was very confused because it said, "Oh, you're done swimming now." No, I'm not done swimming. I'm just waiting to get to the bloody sea.
Hang on, this guy's walking in the sea. What is this guy?
What's the point? Yeah, Jesus mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, but the thing is that when you're done with it, you roll it and it does a bap bap bap, and you get a little droplets from the side.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Fantastic. Anyway, now every time I pick the activity, the workout tool, the first one is a outdoor walk, and the second one now is open water swim.
Well, there you go. So you're much more active than I am, because I haven't done any exercise for a long time.
I only went swimming twice.
That's more than me.
I'll share the map, because it keeps track of how much do you actually swim, and it does the little map, which is fantastic.
I should use it when I'm kayaking more than I do, actually, because that's probably an exercise by now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, I mean, but again, it's just this whole coolness that you and I get very excited about, and I'm guessing most people have no idea that the devices are capable of doing these things.
How many times it happens that there are features available on the phone or computer, and you show people that they can do them, and they had no idea. Which, to some degree, I think it goes back to that critique to Apple, was say they are not doing enough for people to discover these features. Which, I mean, it's
tough, isn't it? Because if it's popping up all the time, it's going to annoy people. If they could maybe write it up more than they do, but then that's going to require people to go and look.
But I do think that there has been a tendency over the last probably 4 or 5 generation, especially of iOS, in making it much nicer and more polished, but also removing a lot of indicators. I mean, for example, buttons are not buttons anymore. If you look across iOS, most buttons is just text that you are supposed to tap, and mostly you remember that is how you interact with it, but is not as visible as a button, as something that reminds.
It's not asking to be pressed. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not saying that we need to go back to stitched leather skeuomorphic UIs.
I was thinking that horror raised its prospect. Yeah,
but there might be a place between that and the current very, very play, which maybe I might have read somewhere that they are doing it. I haven't really had the time to look at all the new announcement on iOS 12. So there might
13.
actually be 13, sorry. So there might actually be changes.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because just as you're sort of, we're talking about skeuomorphism and helping people and triggers and stuff, thinking about the work context and, both of my work contexts in a sense. I mean, when I was in Australia, I was talking to a group of enterprise architects who, enterprise architecture, for those who don't know, is the IT thing of trying to make sure that all the systems do the right things, connect in the right ways, talk to each other, and that the whole thing hangs together in a sensible way rather than a sort of patchwork of different bits and pieces that don't talk to each other. And this group, interestingly, I thought, were beginning to expand their offering into organisation design. And I also met somebody who was combining IT and HR. She was head of both IT and HR. And I think that's an interesting and long needed, I think, combination of perspectives on the organisation that we need to be thinking about what we're doing with the technology and what the consequences are and what people will, how people will benefit from it. And, so much business software is really pretty awful and people are using it at a very, very rudimentary level. But you could imagine as more of the systems join up and the consequences of different actions within the systems become more visible, you could have some very productive prompts to people that would help them be more effective in what they're doing. And the reason I mentioned the other side of my work is driving trucks and just the whole thing about cars and, watching my dad with a new car and it's all electronic. Or even me, I was driving a Mercedes van the other day there and got caught out in the first instance to the fact that it had USB-C sockets on it, so I had no blooming connections for it. But then everything was sort of virtual on the dashboard and there was no buttons anywhere and their iconography was unfamiliar to me. And I felt very akin to my dad, thinking, all I want is a switch. I just want a mechanical switch that I can switch on and off and I know something will happen. So, as I say, in both of those directions, I think there's so much coolness that could happen in a work context that would make stuff easier. But there's also some incredible potential for mess.
I think that what is interesting in all these different aspects is that there is a centrality of the task of a designer, where
yes.
you not only design the product or the interaction, but you design the action and you design the purpose, and you basically
yes.
go back to the very bottom of the challenges of any type of organization, and you
yes.
try to create something from there. I mean, a lot of the work that we do with startup is around trying to design the strategy of a company so that by the time they actually start building a product, they do the right thing. They build the stuff that is at the top of their priorities. Because all too often you have companies that think they have a technology problem, but they really have a strategy problem. The challenge is that they're doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. So
yes.
the struggles they might have with technology is really just a symptom of a problem in designing their strategy. And I think
partly hence my comment about it's easier to digitize our dysfunctions than to deal with them. Because even existing organizations who are maybe not starting from scratch, but they will try to fix what are people problems with technology.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one area which is absolutely where you can see the most extreme examples of this is Italian bureaucracy, where you have these hard, convoluted system that get turned into more hard and more convoluted technology, and then everybody's telling themselves how sophisticated and advanced we are because we are the only ones who have this technology. Nobody actually wonders why that doesn't anybody else have it. Maybe because they don't need it, and it's
so true.
but it is a consequence of trying to digitize the wrong thing. Is a consequence of instead of trying to solve a problem and to look deeper in why you're doing something, you just start doing it in a different way. And
Yes.
but I think it is profound how teaching everybody to design is going to become important. The design thinking. I'm not saying design thinking trademark. I'm
Because I mean that's a bit like everything else, like agile.
No,
or whatever. It's been overdone, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I mean I think there are very useful tools there, but then again using the tools is not enough. But this idea of trying to deconstruct a problem and then trying to build a solution based on what you have discovered in the process of deconstructing is very, very helpful, and it is helpful. If you want to create your own smart macro by talking to Siri, it is helpful if you want to create the next cool app as a startup, and it is useful if you're trying to make your company work better. I mean, there is no AI that is going to replace that bit. I mean,
Really?
Yes, I think that deconstructing problems, deconstructing at least complex problems, is still going to be something quite human for a while.
Not sure.
Once you have understood what the problem is, I'm pretty sure that there might be a UI that will help you to put it back together.
Do you not think it's possible to sort of just track consequences? I was making the jokey point about tracking meetings and whatever happens as a result of them. You would be able to make, well, possibly for the first time, visible the mess and the inefficiencies of an organisation. I mean, that's again sort of what happens when you put a technology in. It suddenly it makes you aware of all the issues. But I can imagine tools being able to track consequences, work out what triggered those consequences, and then do a better job of eliminating some of those triggers.
I think probably the truth is somewhere in the middle, in the sense that of course there will be. There are methodologies that will allow you to improve and make things more efficient. At the same time, I think that very often designing a solution doesn't mean making something more efficient. It means making something completely different.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
And while I do agree that an AI will allow you to optimize things, an AI will allow you to you optimize the use of your time, or point at the 3 people that we need to fire in this organization because they attend a meeting all day long and they're completely useless. But it will not allow you to say, well, maybe we should do something completely different.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not really solving the problem. What is the core problem that we're solving? The challenge is not how efficient we are from a meeting to the other. It's what are we trying to achieve as an organization in long term? Because we might be incredibly efficient at doing nothing, or we might be not particularly great, but we're changing the world one little step at a time. So
that was partly why I ended up my article about ideology of algorithms by suggesting we could get AI to write our next ism. Mm-hmm. In a similar vein, because is it about... It's really interesting, this. I mean, is progress, is greater collective happiness or satisfaction a process of eliminating problems, or is it about creating entirely new, exciting it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're sort of getting assistance from the technology, as you rightly said, right at the very beginning at a basic level. But that potential for assistance is going to just expand, and it's back to this whole thing about working out what our USP is. How does it assist us? Which bits are we better at?
Yeah, I do think that from the collaboration between natural and artificial intelligences, we might be able to, we will eventually be able to create superhumans, and we will be able to improve ourselves by bouncing off these other type organizations of entities. But at the same time, the thing is that as humans, we are living in this collective belief system that that AIs will probably struggle to interpret. And until we get to that point, did you see the TV show Chernobyl?
No, I haven't seen it. No.
It's interesting, but probably one of the most interesting aspects is that you have a description of the Soviet society, which is completely not true. The Russians actually have said they are going to do their own version of the show where they will show that the American did it. But let's say in this completely fictional interpretation of what the Soviet society might have looked like from the point of view of an American writer, there is a system where everybody believes in, or everybody pretends they believe in a system. They don't, but they have to pretend. So they they do this against science. So basically, the reason why no one is scrambling for the emergency is because there cannot possibly be an accident in the Soviet society, and they stick with the story no matter what the evidence is. Now, that is extreme, but to some degree...
We do it all the time.
Exactly. To some degree, the funny thing is that, we do it all the time. We at different levels, but we're all playing our parts, and we're all playing our parts even when we know that it's a fake, but, it is part of being members of a society.
That's right.
So the impact that and to some degree, going to meetings is part of us playing a role.
That's right. Having a job is part of that. I mean, the group I was working with in Australia was Jobs Australia, who help support people who are looking for work. And, we got into the whole thing about the nature of a job, the status of a job, the sense of self that you get from having a job, and what happens when those things start to disappear. And you're right, we get very stuck in our stories, and it's sometimes just out of fear of letting them go and not knowing what's going to happen.
The challenge is that stories give us define our identity. So you can't just walk into this room with your Scottish accent and say, "Oh, you don't need a job," because it's hard. People will try to resist that, and somebody
tell me about it.
I know. So. It is interesting to think how introducing systems that are optimizing the processes and that are trying to interpret the logic processes, how much will they understand of the nature of these stories?
Well, and you mentioned something about natural intelligence earlier, and there was a fantastic Joe Rogan podcast with a geneticist recently, which was just genuinely mind-blowing and terrifying around what we can do now that we understand DNA and can manipulate it, manipulate the genome. And, again, hugely potentially positive and exciting possibilities, but all of them with a very dark underside. And he then, at the end of this thing, they got into the combination of genetics and AI, because the guy was saying, basically the genome is a data store. It's the data that collecting all the DNA gives them that's giving them these opportunities to see patterns in that data and do something with genetics. And so in a way, I mean, this is why recently the story that, America, Trump making statements about the NHS and the amount of data that the NHS has about the population of the UK and our illnesses and our, is massive and is incredibly valuable. And the thought of that just suddenly waltzing off to some commercial interest in America is horrendous. And so that whole, even the natural world is we're already buggering it up to some extent, but we could get so much worse.
Well, I guess that the challenge is that we have reached the point where we have more data that human mind can cope with.
Well, and that's why I sometimes think it's almost anthropomorphic to compare. So you almost did this when we were talking about design. And it's almost like we're comparing AI with our form of intelligence and the bits that we relish and we hold dear in our form of intelligence. But it might be that AI and vast amounts of data generate whole new types of intelligence that we just don't even understand.
No, exactly. But the point is that for sure, we cannot do anything with this amount of data. I mean, our brain is just not useful to process that data. So we can feed the data. We can feed the data to machines and see what they come up with. And even if we are creating these machines, there is a certain degree of unpredictability, not only on the base results, but also on the meta results and how these thinking systems will evolve.
Did you said predictability? Did you mean unpredictability?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the fear, that's the worry that we can't even keep up with understanding what they're doing. Never mind being able to do it.
Yeah. And on this happy note...
I was going to say, we've got to end on a cheerful note, Paolo.
Yeah, I was saying...
But hey, while the world's ending, I can do all this cool stuff with my watch.
And on this happy note, I'm noticing that we are above the... Even once I edited this down, it's going to be more than half an hour, which I think is an unbearable time. I apologize to our listeners that we dragged this so long. So as we said, the future is going to be dark as far as the healthcare and the future of humankind, but we will be able to talk to our watch. And it's
going to be miserable, but will last longer.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And
see you next time.
Bye.